I am Dr. Mistoria Brown. I am a true Floridian, resting and residing, born and raised in the city of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a recent graduate of the University of Miami, and I am currently proud to say I represent the teaching and learning program. So go every educator that is rising to the challenge. That is the cultivation of who I am, but I think it's going to be a little bit more about who I'm becoming. I am becoming an emerging researcher, community advocate, and one that has always stood firm in the lines and where my research lies, which is identity, culture, and how do those things intersect through affinity spaces. Directly looking at the areas of social structures in alumni associations and different things that what we call within the Black community our social identity structures and how we move affluently through those spaces. My work centers and highlights the areas of community cultural wealth, which is a framework and theory that was done through Dr. Tara Yoso. Affinity spaces, Dr. James G. The beautiful work of the New London Group, Multiliteracies, and the anchor of it all, Sankofa, with this, the method and the methodology. And I believe it centers not just what overarches and anchors my work, but Sankofa is the work of my heart, the work of my identity, and what the community I've also affluently been raised in taught me. We must always go back and get it. And the work and partnering with the Center for Global Black Studies allowed for me to be able to explore essentially that beautiful Guyanese phrase in depth through my own lived experiences and my own cultural identity, looking at it not just through the aspect of social structures and social culture, but being able to take it a step further into what is considered now the 21st century, but also what we're moving into ahead. I look at it through technology, and what does that look like in the lens and frameworks of technology, and how are we cultivating these different affinity spaces that have been historically the bedrock of the Black and Brown communities. But how are we doing it now that we're transitioning into these spaces of technology? So where are we moving archives? Where are we moving our social structures? Where are we moving our amens to from the community church choirs and the church pews? And how are they moving into these digital spaces now that we are seeing this unilateral move and push into these new frameworks? And so my work has basically started in seed form. I can't really say it's work yet. I feel like I am still in the interview phase of what I am exploring, and I'm so gracious to be honored to be the person that gets to explore this type of work, something that is definitely true and near and dear to my heart when it comes to identity, culture, technology, and also just looking at it from an Afrocentric lens of knowing that the essence of who we are is where we start, and if we always understand where we started, then we'll always know who we are. Essentially, my research connected back to my old high school. Why? Because I needed to understand how did I belong in that particular space? And more importantly, how did the work and the history of the first African-American school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, actually build into what we culturally see right now, meaning what does it mean to be a Dillard Panther? And understanding that gave me a greater insight into the community cultural wealth that Dr. Tara Yoso speaks about. It gave me a greater insight into Dr. James G's affinity space work, which is a theoretical framework that was used. But it also helped me to push forward to say, how do we utilize this in digital spaces? How are we taking what we've learned in our own identities, communities, and social structures and ensuring that we're not leaving behind what makes us so us? How are we doing it? And so the New London Group's work when it comes to multiliteracy started to make me really understand, like, what are we doing when it comes to archival work and understanding how we ensuring we're capturing history, we're understanding the fact that we are making history each and every day, but also how are we going back to get what identifies us, what defines us, what makes us culturally accepted, makes us culturally understood, what makes us who we are. What is it like to be in Miami? Wow, it depends. Are we talking about the beaches, the sunny South Florida, the area where I can go and relax? Or are we talking about that which is the heart of Miami, the people, the culture? We're not a tourist, but understanding that there are some different dynamics that when you explore the roots and the essence of the Magic City, what does it really mean to have influence in your work by Miami, the city of Miami? For me, I think it's the same of having the influence from my hometown, which is just 20 minutes away in Fort Lauderdale. But having the essence of something like the University of Miami, that's different. Because what I see here in the culture of the University of Miami is very reminiscent to what I see at home in my culture at Dillard High School, which is a community of people who rise not just because of a brand, but because of a collective identity that we all share. We all represent the U. And so it reframes race, it reframes social class, it reframes intellectual classes, and it brings us all to this collective identity of saying it's all about you at the U. And so my work became essentially a way where I started to begin to ask myself, how do I actually build into the U? Like, where is my place of belonging here at the University of Miami? And it brought me back to a space that I felt the most accepted, welcome, and identified in my life, which was my high school, Dillard High School, which is established in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And it was the first school in Broward County for African-American students, established in 1907. This brought me back to that central place of questioning, how do I belong here? How do I identify here in this new space? How do I impart? How do I grow here? Essentially, I was asking myself, how do I plant my seed here at the University of Miami so I can be able to become Dr. Mistoria Brown? And so it brought me back to the roots of where my first seed was planted in identity, culture, and also that resilience, basically the work of Taro Yoso that speaks to who we have and what we are when it comes to community cultural wealth. And looking at what my thesis was titled, The Wealth We Carry, it talked about what do we carry within, meaning in every space we go to. So the influence of the University of Miami was big. Why? Because I don't care where you go. You see the University of Miami's logo. You can be in Tennessee, you can be in New York, you can go anywhere and you will never go a day to this day here in South Florida. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I do not see orange and green. And although I am a lady of blue, I do love orange and green now that I'm with the youth. To follow my work and to stay tuned is essentially a beautiful story I can share. There's a woman by the name of Dr. Dorothy Field Jenkins, and I went to sit with her. She's an archivist here in the beautiful city of Miami. And I went to sit with her one day because she was tutoring me and training me on archiving. And she said to me, as she passed the old newspaper toward me, "This is what you all call content now." And I just looked at her and thought about that. The way she was able to help make the connection for me in my space and my learning environment from a place that she historically has built such a beautiful foundation and what we traditionally call old things archives. And I think for me, it started to push my social structures and my methodologies of multimodals forward and say, wait a minute, we're creating in history now. So we must start looking at what we're doing now in many of the digital and social spaces as the content of now that will become the archives of later. And so that helps me to understand when I am sharing, where can you follow my work? Where can you continue to see what we're posting and how I'm researching and how I'm interacting in these digital archive spaces? Essentially, it is in the social spaces. Following me on my social media channels, Brown versus Education, also looking at my website, goye.ai. But I would say essentially the work that I have done with Dillard High School and the work I am continuing to do with historical Black high schools here in South Florida, essentially with Booker T. Washington, Dillard High School. And I even started looking at a school by the name of Jones High in Orlando, Florida. But these are all historical Black educational institutions that have given so much life and affluent spaces to African Americans and the African diaspora. And my goal is to continue researching and looking into that work. So essentially follow the 1907 collection. The 1907 collection on all social platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and even our website, 1907collection.com. It would allow you to not just read my blogs about the work I'm looking into, but also see how we're making the intergenerational connection and seeing how I'm not just learning the information for myself, but essentially I am an educator at heart. how am I passing it forward? How am I always going back to get it and ensuring that I'm pulling up and reaching behind to make sure the next generation is not just carriers of our knowledge, but they are also the protectors of what they carry. First and foremost, I just want to give honor to Christ, who's the head of my life, and my ability to even have the knowledge capability to be able to make these interconnections and see things the way I see it. My parents are hard workers, both in the areas of divinity, community, social work, and technology. I want to definitely give a shout out to Global Black Studies because I believe that the honor in which they were able to bestow the access to resources allow for me to be able to have a level of freedom in being able to really sit with the work and have an access to my community in a way that I wasn't afforded before. So I want to definitely give a definitely beautiful shout out to the Center for Global Black Studies, to the Department of Education here at the University of Miami. The Teaching and Learning Department and the EPS department has been a wealth of knowledge for me to not just come in and glean from, but also a space where I was able to come and innovate in and not be denied my thought process of innovation in that space. So I am so thankful into that particular area for helping me to become. I give a definite shout out, I can't forget this name, to Dr. Gray of the University of Michigan, the other you. Yeah. But definitely I love her because she is a woman who basically started to introduce me to digital studies and social identity. And it really started to help me to have a framing of what does it look like when it comes to gender roles within the social space. And then I was able to take that and look at what Dr. James G., his beautiful work and the work he's done in affinity spaces and social literacies, and be able to combine that. And so these were members of my committee and the work of none other than Dr. William Carpenter, who's a early scholar here at the University of Miami and faculty member who studies African American studies. This particular group of individuals allowed for me to have not just access to the work, but also to be able to glean on the work they've already done. The one person who really kind of sparked my interest into looking at what it is that we do within community spaces and how do we protect it was actually the Dean of the School of Education, Dean Laura Conwood. I gotta give a shout out because I ended up reading one of her articles, and it was the way she looked at the race area and the race theory she has designed around protection that made me start to look at how are we actually protecting what it is that we design and what we are honoring when it comes to our history, our archives, as we are just essentially learning how to navigate into these new digital spaces. So I definitely want to give them a shout out. I'm trying to think, am I forgetting anyone else? Definitely my hometown, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Dillard High School, as I've already mentioned, but I want to shout out to all the other beautiful places. Ely High School, Board Anderson High School, Hollandale High School, which is an educated space where I actually was teaching, and my students told me that I needed to pursue further education because more students needed a Miss Brown class. So I definitely want to shout out to all my students who I've ever been in contact with and have ever allowed for me to have the opportunity to serve them as an educator.